Hello, guys. Welcome to another episode of NewzDash webinars. Thanks for attending today. I would love to welcome my good friend and colleague, Mike King. He is the CEO and founder of IPOL Rank, and I don't say it lightly. He's one of the pioneers and advanced SEOs in our industry. So, Mike, thanks so much for coming and joining us.
John, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. This has been a incredibly exciting time in SEO. So happy to talk about to anyone that'll listen.
Thank you, Mike. So I have a ton of questions. And I prepared some, but we received a ton of questions from audience. Hey guys, I want to remind you that on your right panel there is Q&A. So as we go along, please submit your questions over there, and you can vote on each of your questions, and then we can ask Mike. So today's session, 45 minutes. I have some questions for Mike, then we will have all your QA questions. So you have some time to put your Q&A questions here. Okay, guys. So let's start. Mike, I want to ask you a few questions about the leak itself, right?
Okay.
So the first question I have for you is like, how did you initially came across the leak documents? And what was your action when you first got it?
So I was literally at a art thing for my kids at school, and Rand
Okay.
hits me up and he's like, I got these documents. I need you to see them because we need to validate and verify that they're actually a Google leak. And I'm excited. I run home. I jump on Google Meet, and he's showing me this stuff, and I'm like, "Yo, this looks really real." And so he lets me know that a guy named Irfan Azimi had reached out to him and said, like, "Hey, I've got these documents. You should be the one to spread this." And so Rand said to me, he was like, "Hey, I don't think I'm technical enough to really understand this stuff. So can you help me?" And so I spent Memorial Day weekend just like going through it. And of course, I had things to do with the family because it's a holiday. But like every free moment I had, I was just digging through the documents and contextualizing them with a variety of other documents. But one of the things that happened was is that I tweeted something vague. I was like, "Yeah, I'm going to set SEO Twitter on fire next week. I got my hands on something crazy." And then Dan Petrovic, he was like, "Do you have what I think you have?" And we were like kind of dancing around it. I was like, "Well, I got this thing." And he was like, "Well, I got this." And then we eventually realized we had the same thing. And what happened was is he had found it on like May 7th or May 6th, and he had turned it in to Google for a bug
Yeah.
bounty. And he had been just going through all of it. He collated it in a variety of ways. He built like an internal search engine out of it. And he shared all that stuff with me. He was like, "Yeah, I want you to be the one to take it public." And I was like, "Cool." So like I said, I spent the whole weekend going through everything, and also just again contextualizing it with the all the different research that I've been doing for my book. And then what I shared on whatever day that was, I guess like Sunday night, Monday morning or whatever, is what was ultimately out there, and then everyone else started to jump on it as well. And it's been great just to have that conversation with folks because some people are adding on with what they know. So as an example, Jeff Coyle over at Market Muse, I felt like what he wrote was
Yeah.
really great with respect to like knowledge graphs and NLP and so on. So yeah, it's been a really cool experience. It's yielded a lot of people wanting to work with us, and yeah, I'm not mad.
It's interesting that a lot of the like usually a lot of the events when you talk about something that came your way or something you work on, usually it has something to do with kids. I was in a kids party, I was
Mhm.
there, and someone approached me, so this is awesome. Can you explain to us, right, in simple terms, what is the scope and nature of these league documents?
Yeah, it's a lot of things, right? Like it includes Google Assistant, it includes YouTube, it includes, a little bit from Discover. There's a lot related to Knowledge Graph, Knowledge Vault, and of course, the lion's share of it is related to core organic search. And so I think that's where some of the confusion, or at least, a lot of people have come out and be like, "Well, we don't know what this is. It could be anything." I mean, those people didn't read the documents, frankly. But most of it is core organic search.
Okay, awesome. What okay, when people read attributes,
Hmm.
what are attributes
Yeah,
in
so
the
that
ecosystem of algorithms?
Sure. So the attributes are effectively the variables that are used. So think of it as it's the ingredients, not the recipe, right?
Okay.
And so what we can learn from this is there's descriptions for those attributes, and they talk about the different ranking systems that they're used in. They talk about, what they are. Um, and there's some indication of like, here's how this can be used, not for every data point in there. And again, I don't want us to say like these are ranking factors, because they're not all necessarily ranking factors. They're all just different features that could be used and could be turned into ranking factors. And so here's an example, right? Like,
Okay.
there are not that many things in there that talk about CTR. Like, I think there was one
Yeah.
or two data points that I saw that were CTR. And so SEOs are being like, see, they're not using CTR,
Yeah.
which is ridiculous, right? Like, we're talking about, one of the world's most sophisticated computer science systems, and you think they can't divide clicks by impressions in runtime? Like, it's a ridiculous thing to say. So and that's kind of my point. Like, we don't know what they're doing downstream, but we do know, like, we have a really large confirmation of what these features may be at this point. And it's not to say that they're all of them. It's to say that these are like, this is a good subset for us to be looking at to better understand how search works.
Yeah. Okay. Um, I want to talk about something specific that got a lot of attention. Nav
Hmm.
boost.
Yeah.
Can you talk to us a little bit about Nav boost? What it is? What are the implications? And so on.
Yeah, NavBoost is basically the Twiddler, which is, a system outside of the core ranking system that allows them to collect user behavior information and use that to inform what should continue to rank. And so it's basically like saying like, hey, clicks are used to reinforce rankings. And so think about it like this, right? They have to basically validate what is ranking, because the system is so complex. We're talking about billions of users. We're talking about, potentially trillions of web pages. And they need to have other signals in addition to the core ranking systems, right? And so, when you talk about things like clicks, that is one part of it. And what they're trying to determine is like, what is a successful session on the keyword level? So some of the measures that are available are good clicks, bad clicks, long clicks, squash clicks. And, it's not enough to just like get a click. They're also tracking, does a user come back and click on something else? Do they stay on that page longer? Or do they, come back to the SERP and then perform a very similar search and then end up
Okay.
clicking on something else? So these are all different ways that they can measure user behavior to indicate whether or not it was a successful session. Because at the end of the day, Google
Okay.
needs to make sure that like people are getting what they want out of their results.
Okay. Got it. So, can you explain to me what's a long click?
Yeah, long click would be effectively a successful click. So a click that, a user stays on the page long enough to get the information, and also doesn't like go back and click on another result and stay on that result longer, or doesn't change their search because they didn't successfully find what they wanted. And so, I don't have any clear indication of this in these documents, but I would imagine that Google is measuring the distance between your initial query and the subsequent query. And if they're very close and the results are also very close, then they might think of that first result or the first set of results as unsuccessful for that user. And, it makes sense. Like, they talk a lot about query reformulation and, how they track things across queries. So that's why I'm saying like, this is my hypothesis. It wasn't like clear in the
Okay.
documentation, but the whole point is that long clicks are just a measure of the success of clicking on a result.
Okay. Is this is something that we can measure to see if the user got a satisfactory or satisfying visit to the site?
Yeah, I think we can, but we can't measure it the way that Google does it without clickstream data. And what I mean
Okay.
by that is like, we only have what happens when they land on our site. We also have click-through rates via GSC, we have impressions and all that. And so we could develop some sort of composite metric that's based on, time on site, number of events, bounce rate, things like that. But it's not necessarily what Google is using, because they're not looking at our on-site analytics. They're just looking at the behavior on the SERP and then how long between going back and forth between pages. But if you had something like a similar web, or like the different clickstream data
Mhm.
sources that are able to measure what's going on across, like their session in the browser, then yeah, you could measure something very similar.
Okay. Can we say that the implications here for news sites or sites in general is like how can we keep users longer in our site? So how we can generate the second click or the second view, how we can generate, I don't know, engaging content and elements on the page to keep users longer in the site.
Absolutely. I would say, one of the things, the most important thing as it relates to Nav Boost is exactly like how do we make the user experience more sticky, right? And I think one of the things that people do on news sites where it's like that infinite scroll of pages is a good way to do that. Because
Okay.
like, oh, okay, I read this article. Oh, this one is interesting to me too. And you just keep going. That's going to yield more of the signals back to Google that that's a successful click. So that user is far less likely to go back to the SERP within less than like a minute if the article is, comprehensive enough that it takes them long enough to read that. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a variety of different UX things that we should be thinking about. But to your point, absolutely, we want to keep people on these pages as long as possible.
Okay, awesome. I think one of the recommendations I give to one of the clients is like the related articles module, right? To
Hmm.
test who is related. So if a user is reading something about Taylor Swift, what other Taylor Swift, we know that the user is interested in that topic. So we
Yep.
give him related or the most popular article on the site that has the highest CTR internally, right? So when you have like homepage articles and you know that one headline really does magic and a lot of people like to click it, so there's different ways you can test around it there. Okay, what was the most surprising, revealing, the most significant findings in the Google Leak docs? So let's start with the surprising and revealing. What was the most surprising? Oh my God.
The most revealing is watching what people say about it. Honestly, it's just like, oh, you really don't know what you're doing. Okay. Anyway, no, I think for me, it was some things like how important they think dates are. The fact that they're not only like taking the dates at face value, they're also trying to semantically determine dates within your content. They're looking at a variety of different date signals. And so, especially for news, I think that's incredibly important because it just goes to show that they want to surface fresh content as much as possible. It's not just like, oh yeah, we discovered this at this point, and so this is when we believe it's from. They're just really trying to tie a document to dates. Also, just the way that they're trying to localize everything, like or not every,
Yeah.
a lot of the different modules indicate that Google is trying to localize whatever your query is. I thought that the idea that there's a fixed number of slots per content type on a given SERP was really interesting. So, the way I've
Okay.
explained it is if you've got like 3 news articles and it only allows for 3, well, you probably will not be able to get into that SERP if those 3 sites are like incredibly authoritative. And I think that what we do as SEOs, we just assume like, oh, I'm going to make a better page and I'm going to get in there. It just may not be possible based on how that SERP is, the limitations on how that SERP is constructed. The confirmation of Chrome data was
Yeah.
really big for me, especially as it relates to real-time boost. So real-time boost, I think I talked about it a little bit in my post, but there are several like design documents around real-time boost that leaked, and it's really their way to replace what they were getting out of Twitter by using their indexing signals to surface content faster. So in the design documents, it talks about how they compared how long it took for Twitter to surface breaking news. It was like 7 minutes, but originally the Google systems took 14 minutes. And so they were
Okay.
like, okay, we want to be able to extract entities effectively from content as we index it to determine when breaking news is happening. The fact that they use homepage page rank associated with every single page was really compelling to me. And then, the whole nav boost thing just being further confirmed and reinforced, and us being able to see what signals are being used. And then the last thing that was good for me, at least as a confirmation, was just a confirmation of like what we call in SEO the plus 50 penalties, where it's like you don't get like banned, but you get pushed down 50
Yeah.
positions. It was just good to see that, confirmed in the documentation as well.
Yeah, it's funny. You mentioned dates. I remember maybe 10 years ago or something in Google News specifically, if you mention any reference of date, Google actually may misunderstood. So if you said suspect apprehended of the last March shooting,
Yep.
Google will actually think that that story is from last March or last year, and
Hmm.
they will like reject it in news. So it's funny. Sometimes Google doesn't have a good understanding of dates. Um, can you was there anything that was misunderstood by you or by the community and got you was like, oh, now I see, now I understand, I didn't understand that correctly before, or the community in general is like, no, we were thinking about it completely different. The
You're gonna get me in
confession booth
trouble.
here. Yeah.
um, I don't know if I can like pinpoint one thing because my feed has been so crazy with misinformation over the last couple weeks. Again, I think it just goes back to people seeing what they want to see. There's a whole lot of
Yes.
like confirmation bias happening, and people still wanting to be like Google doesn't use clicks. I'm like, what more information can I give you at this point? Like. So I think that is like a big point of contention. I think that there's a lot of people still trying to like sell links the way that they sell them.
Yeah.
So like going after volume rather than relevance, quality, and those sorts of assessments. So I think the thing that was revealed in there where it talks about links and their quality assessment being associated with where they live in the index. And just for anyone who didn't read that one, because I thought that was really compelling. Google basically, I mean, the index isn't just one thing, right? Like I think we talk about it as an abstraction where it's like, oh yeah, we just put in this one database. Like no, the
No.
index is built in a variety of different systems. One of which is called Alexandria, which is called FreshDocs, which is where I imagine most of news lives.
News. Yeah.
And there's a variety of different aspects to it, but it's also stratified in different ways. So one component of it lives in flash memory, one component of it lives in solid state drives, one lives in like regular HDDs or whatever. And so they apply more value to the stuff that lives in fresh memory. And the stuff that lives in fresh memory is also going to be the stuff that ranks the best because they know that users are more likely to click on these documents. So they keep it in a very fast or the fastest place that they can store it. And so those links end up having, I don't want to call it page rank, but let's just use page rank as a simplification. They have more authority or more link equity to flow to these other pages. And so to that end, again, most of the documents related to news are going to live there. And so that's why digital PR has been so valuable, right? Like it's going to be links it's going to be links from pages that Google's considers the most important. And
Okay.
so understanding that adds another lens or another level to how we build links moving forward. Like I don't want to build links from any pages that don't have any traffic. And I think historically we've always said it doesn't matter how much traffic a page
Yeah.
gets because we just think about the original version of PageRank, which is effectively obsolete, right? Like the only or not only there's mentions of PageRank across the documentation, but there's also something called PageRank NS or PageRank nearest seeds, which kind of turns up the dial on you getting links from more trusted sources. And so yeah, you can't just do linking based on volume. I mean, you could, but it's just not going to get you the
It's not.
value
Yeah.
of getting it from like 10 sites that are very high value.
Thank you. Uh, there is a lot of questions about how old are these documents, and some mentioned this is like an old version V4, and there's another version, and so on. Do
Hmm.
you have an idea, like how old or how applicable these revelations in the document, like time wise?
Yeah, I mean, we can't necessarily verify that, but what I can say is that when Dan discovered this, he saw it in the V5 version. And so the
Okay.
V5 version had been published recently. when he had discovered it. But the V4 version is the one that everyone is looking at, right? So V4, V3, and V2 still have all the data in it. V5 has been patched, and that's the one that's currently live on GitHub. So
Okay.
we don't necessarily know, like, is this 0 day or whatever, but at the same time, it references some very recent stuff, right? It's referencing LLMs. It's
Yeah.
referencing a variety of things that like have come out more recently. So I wouldn't look at how old it is to invalidate it. I think at the very least, it's still giving us a very clear picture of things that Google has been looking at recently.
Okay. I want to ask you a question. Why didn't Google take these documents offline?
I don't know. Maybe they can't, right? Like, because the thing is, what everyone is looking at is a separate tool called HexDocs.
Yes.
HexDocs, it automatically generates documentation from what's on GitHub. So perhaps they don't have access to it. Maybe they've reached out to HexDocs or whatever, but maybe they just don't have the ability to easily take it down. At the same time, it's also again the ingredients, not the recipe, and so it doesn't necessarily give us the weights of anything. Frankly, the way I feel is like if we got all of Google, we still wouldn't know, like we still wouldn't be able to affect it in the way that we think we can. Even if we got all the source code, all the design documents, like it would be incredibly expensive to fake all the user metrics for every keyword you want
Yeah.
to rank for. So I don't really think, like, I'm sure they're like, well, the risk here isn't as big as people think it is.
Okay. Got it. Okay. I want to ask you a question. So, in the light of the leaks, the Google search API leak, how do you see SEO professionals should approach their work? Right? Should it fundamentally change their strategy and tactics? What do you see? What do you see should be changed, and what shouldn't be changed?
Yeah. I think to some degree, like we've got some validation that we know what we're doing, right? Like I think that there's a lot of things in there that were confirmations, but I think that there's also things we need to rethink strategically. Like the distance between UX and SEO is too big. People think of
Yes.
UX as this thing and SEO as this thing. I think they need to be intermingled because getting people to stay on pages is the name of the game here. And the best way to do that at scale is with very well designed content with users in mind, right? I think in SEO, we start from the keyword rather from the user. Um, I think fundamentally link building needs to change. I think we need to be thinking very thoughtfully, thinking thoughtfully. I think we need to be very thoughtful about how we deploy content in new subject areas as well. So, in the case of a news site, I think inherently you're already doing varied subject matter. So it's less of a concern there. But at the same time, I think, if you're a site that like is very focused on, let's say, 4 areas of news, and then you introduce this new area where you don't have any other content, it's going to be more difficult for you to rank for that content. And so it kind of goes back to that idea of topical clusters. You should only launch new content if you're going to launch like a cluster of it, because
Yeah.
otherwise Google's going to look at that and say, you're not a subject matter expert on this, so you don't really deserve to rank here, and it's just going to be more difficult for you. But at the same time, I think the way you get over that is more about the authors who have demonstrated that subject matter expertise rather than like you just try to make 1,000 pages on the subject. So yeah, I think there's some tactical things that need to change. I think there's some strategic things that need to change as well. But I think our foundation is solid. And what I don't want to see is, more people just like going out to use a bunch of CTR tools, trying to like spin everything.
I mean, I can confirm there are companies in Europe that sell CTR optimization, and
Yeah.
like, yeah, and it's like a big business. I wasn't aware of that, but it seems, and they show the results actually. I have to give shout out to Rand Fishkin, because this guy 10 years ago or 12 years ago, when he started talking about clicks and all of that stuff, and the amount of skepticism, hate, and denial by Google, it was like unreal. So shout out to him.
Yeah, I agree. So, even before this leak with the DOJ testimony,
Yes.
my last few talks, I've just been saying like everybody owes Rand an apology because he was so right and he continues to be right. And, we just allowed Google to like demonize him. And then a bunch of people in SEO that just don't like Rand for whatever reason just hopped on, that bandwagon. And I think that's really unfortunate because Rand did a lot of great things for this space. Like that's undeniable. Whether you like the man or not,
Yes.
he did a lot of great things for this space.
No, I totally agree. And Russ Jones, thanks Barry for reminding me.
100%.
Yeah.
Russ, rest in peace. He did a lot of amazing things as well. I think he helped our space level up from a technical perspective, a data perspective. And yeah, it's very sad that he's gone, but like he left a great legacy in this space.
Okay. Mike, I have a random question, and I was hesitating should I ask it or not, because I personally have mixed feeling about it. If
Okay.
John Shehata received an anonymous tip from someone saying, hey, this is a leaked document, right? For, let's say, for Google, for Bing, for whatever, right? What's the right approach? Option one, should I just, hey, keep it for myself, try to gain as much knowledge? Option two, submit it to Google, get the reward money and keep the information to myself. Option three, share it with the community and some people in the community, and then share the whole knowledge that I am aware, I got to know. What do you think is the right approach for SEOs? And I'm asking this question because in the news industry, leaks are a serious business, right? It's like when you get a leak, there's so many things that you need to do. Some leaks get out, some leaks don't. So what do you think?
I think it's a complex question. I think it depends what the leak is. And I'll give you a better example. So, what's his name? Mark Williams Cook. He recently discovered an exploit in Google where he could see all the scores, like all these different features that we're talking about.
Yeah.
He was able to see an endpoint that gives you those scores for every single page in the SERP. And, there are other people in like the Black Hat community who also discovered that. And, they had been leveraging it to like figure out like, okay, how do I make these adjustments to rank better? But Mark, being a nice guy, he turned it into Google and he got the maximum bug bounty for it. Now, that exploit has been closed, but of course, there's other exploits out there that people know about. And so those people keep them to themselves so that they can have an advantage. Me, in this case, me talking about this leak, that's yielded a lot of great stuff for us, right? Like it's yielded tons of leads. It's yielded a lot of news coverage. So really, I think it comes down to your goals, right? Like I don't think it's an ethical consideration at all. Some other people may think it is. And I think it really comes down to like, what are you trying to accomplish? Me, I'm trying to make money.
Aren't we all, right?
Yeah, and the way I make money is by helping as many people as possible, right? Like it doesn't help me to keep these things secret. I think it's cool when people, keep it secret for like a short amount of time and then they share it with their close folks like we do at Oktoberfest and things like that. But I think there's probably more net value in everyone knowing things because it just helps our community level up across the board. And the ideas that you get back really outweighs the advantage you get in the short term.
That's true. That's true. I mean, I saw that you got like, I don't know, 3,000 LinkedIn ads. Okay. Mike, we're going to talk about specifics now. So we're going to like dig deep into the leaked document. Okay. Let's talk everything about topics and entities, right? There's a lot of mentions on topics and entities in relationship to links and site authority and so on and so forth. What can you tell us about topics and entities in the document?
They're important. No, so Google has a whole system called SAFT, which stands for Structured Annotation Framework and Toolkit. And there's a lot of discussion about how entities, work with that. And it's a lot about how they're extracted, what the relationships are between them, what the features mean, how they can be used in terms of understanding the query, how they can be used in sort of understanding the document. And so there's really just a lot more specifics around that. I don't know that there was anything revealed there. And what I mean by that is if you know anything about, knowledge graphs and things like that. It's really just Google talking about their flavor of it and how things are scored and how things are extracted from the centerpiece of the content. Specifically, as it relates to news, they use the first 400 characters from that centerpiece of the content to determine a lot of this stuff. So I don't know how much is actionable there, but it just gives you a sense of like how they're using it, how important it is, and it's not something that we can not have a strategy around. And what I mean by that is, I think we talk about entities academically in the SEO space, but aside from you and like the folks at WordLift and Schema App and InLinks and so on,
Yeah.
um, there's not really enough talk about strategy and like how
Yeah.
do you work that into your content. And it just makes it really clear that Google has that as like one of the primary things that they do in order to understand a document. So yeah, I don't know that I have anything to say like, hey, do this instead of that. It's really like you've got to incorporate an understanding of entities, their relationship, and what's expected based on what entities you're covering in your content. Otherwise, Google is going to like make some inferences based on what they know across their system, and that may not work to your benefit.
Okay, it's interesting. You said the first 400 characters of the centerpiece, right?
Mhm.
And you mean the very first content that comes in your article, right? The very first.
Not necessarily. So when
Okay.
I say the centerpiece of the content, Google is trying to figure out like what is the main content block on the page.
Yeah, the main content, well, right? Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So, if you've got like a link block or TLDR
Yeah.
block
Yeah.
above it, they're going to skip that. They're looking for the main content.
Yeah, it's interesting because one of the recommendations we have been saying for a while is the leading paragraph in a news article
Hmm.
plays a major role, right?
Yep.
And we have always advocated for the inverted pyramid writing style, which is like
Hmm.
the most important facts and information comes first, and then you start like dissecting and telling the story. Because some news publishers and writers, they do out of focus kind of writing style, which is like they talk about something like irrelevant, and then they start getting into the topic. So okay, that's really good to know. Let's talk
Yeah.
about, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say like prominence has always been the thing,
Yes.
right? And that goes back to the fact that search engines didn't always store the full text of the page because they couldn't. They didn't have the storage space. So, it just reinforces like the old school best practice, which has kind of been forgotten. And if we just want to talk about it from a writing perspective, like don't bury the lead. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and it's like in news, we know for sure, for a fact, and I think Gary Ellis mentioned it as well, is like you wanna index that content and publish it as soon as possible, right?
Hmm.
For breaking news and stuff like this. A lot of times, Google doesn't read the whole article. Probably
Hmm.
they get some elements of the article headline, some paragraphs, some schema, and this is what they go with. And that's why sometimes we see duplicates or other stuff. But I think it's very important. Hub pages. What
Hmm.
is the best approach? Hub pages were mentioned a lot throughout the document. What is the best recommendations here around hub pages for news publishers?
Yeah, I don't think that there's anything different that you should be doing from standard SEO, right? Like you want to make sure that the internal linking structure is really well built out. Make sure that it follows like a strong taxonomy throughout the site, um, and also focus on like the relevance. And what I mean by that is like the semantic relevance of those pages. So again, they're going to look at that 400 characters first, but they're also weighing the entirety of the page from a
Yep.
relevance perspective. And then you want the spoke pages to also be somewhat relevant to that core topic, but also be very relevant to the subtopic as well. So I don't think that there's anything net new as it relates to that in the documentation. But I think it does reinforce that you should be taking that strategy.
Okay, a lot of news publishers, and there's multiple plugins on WordPress as well, where you can define your taxonomy, right? And you
Mhm.
say, okay, I don't know, President Joe Biden and Taylor Swift and so on. And whenever you see these kind of entities on the page, you link to the hub page,
Mhm.
hub pages, and which results in millions and millions of hub pages. So what's the right approach here? Should you stick to like the most important entities for your focus topics and areas on the site, or should you just like full blown every entity on the site?
Yeah, I think that really goes back to things like crawl allocation and the link equity
Yeah.
that you have to flow throughout the site. So if you're asking me just like as a blanket statement, yeah, start from the most important ones. But if your site has the ability to like handle,
Yeah.
a bunch more pages, then yeah, go for it. But yeah, I would say most news sites should probably just start from the core entities.
Okay. Internal and external links. You spoke a little bit about them in the beginning and the relevance and the importance of external links from like pages that actually get traffic. Can we speak a little bit about internal links?
Yeah, so one of the key things I saw in there about internal links was the fact that they can be discounted. And it was specifically related to Penguin. So that may mean that, like, to some degree, it may be deprecated. But nevertheless, it talks about this idea of dropped local anchors. And so if you're looking through the documentation, when it says local anchors, those are internal links. That's not like, for local search specifically. And so what's reinforced for me is this idea that they are looking for you to leverage your internal linking structure to do things that you can't do with the external linking structure.
Yeah.
So what I mean by that is like, the best practice that emerged after Penguin was like, okay, don't go for so much exact match anchor text. Really use your internal linking structure to do that, because they have safeguards in place where you can't really like spam yourself through your internal linking structure. So it just reinforces that like you should be using every opportunity to get the anchor text that you want in your anchor or in your internal links, so you have a better opportunity to rank for your target keywords.
Awesome. I can stress how internal links, especially around breaking news. I did a lot of this when I was in ABC News, and it was a great, successful strategy. Okay, UGC.
Yeah,
Okay, let's talk about UGC, user generated content, and
sure.
comments. If we can include that as well as UGC.
Right. So there was a specific feature that I saw that was around content effort for UGC. And so one of the experiments that I'm recommending to clients now is blocking the UGC for crawlers,
Okay.
just to see if that changes anything. And I'm not saying like, make it cloaking, like just make it so it loads after
Yep.
the document ready state. So it's like considered, beyond what Googlebot will see when it renders the page. And so, because the reason why I say we should consider that is if that content effort is not high enough, then that may, demote the page a little bit, or at least make the score of the page a little lower. So just seeing that Google is considering that is just a good indication of like, okay, they are looking for the spam. Like they are looking for the X rumor comment spam. They're looking for the, generative AI comment spam. And they're saying like, this isn't worthwhile. So if your page ends up being, largely comments, and those comments aren't good, that can drag your page down. So it's just a good thing to know, because I think, the best practice has historically been like get as much unique
Yeah.
content on these pages as possible, and UGC can be a good way for that. But as we already know, they're already looking for, UGC spam in general, but we didn't know that they're like measuring the value of UGC content, or UGC rather, and then using that to score the page in general.
Yeah, long time ago, we found some of the pages on one of the publications that I was working on losing momentum and traffic, and we found out that the comments were so bad.
Mm-hmm.
And the comments got to a point that they were much, much larger than the article. So it didn't
Mm-hmm.
even like hurt the article, diluted the focus of the article because people went in so many different like off tangent and stuff like this. And when we delayed or blocked the comments after that, we saw the pages coming back slowly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and one of the things that we do for UGC on the e-commerce side that may be applicable here is give users like prompts and direction as they're doing their review. So, in the news space, we might want to consider doing that sort of thing, for the comment section. Like, what are your thoughts on this? Because you can use generative AI to extract elements from the article and say, like, what was your thought on this idea and things like that. So you can direct the user to give you more feedback that's going to be a lot more relevant.
yeah, and I think like sites like TripAdvisor and so on are so successful in selecting the best comments
Yeah.
and reviews and
Mhm.
displaying them by default on the
Yep.
pages. I think so. That's what they do. Um, let's talk about page speed, performance, all the good technical stuff. Have you seen any elements of page performance, page speed, core web vitals, all this good stuff, and the attributes?
Yeah, there were some mentions of Core Web Vitals. I think the system is specifically called Volt, VOLT. That was referenced. But honestly, I don't care so much about Core Web Vitals anymore. Like I care for news specifically about the cumulative layout shift because that's the one that
Yes,
like is typically the huge
the
problem.
biggest. Yep, yep.
Yeah. And I
Especially
think
with ads and external calls and all this. Yeah, yeah.
exactly. Like fix that anyway. That's just like a
Yeah,
better user experience. But in general, one of the things that I did, I guess about a month ago, is I looked in the Crux data set, which is the one of the data sets that's used for Core Web Vitals. It's
yeah,
like, what they collect over time. It's the 28-day rolling window data set. And I looked at the trend across all the sites, like on average, like since Core Web Vitals started till now. And on average, every site is within the window. So you can also do that specifically for your site and see what the trend looks like. And if you're, below zero point 0.2 for everything, then you're in a good space. And like I said, most sites are fitting in that space. So I don't really highlight Core Web Vitals as like the big thing to do anymore because most people have solved it.
yeah,
And even if you do it, it's not going to like make you rank better overnight. It's like
yeah,
such a small signal. It's just like the HTTPS signal was. It was really Google trying to make the web faster so
yeah.
that compute was cheaper for them at web scale, and they did that. So I don't think that they are weighing it in the way that they probably were when they first rolled it out.
Yeah, it's funny because was a huge business about core web vital fixes,
Hmm.
and many publishers spend hours, month fixing stuff, and yeah. Anyway, so topical authority. I want to talk about topical authority because this is very important, especially for evergreen publishers and news publishers overall. Can you tell me what are the best practices that you see around topical authority in the light of the leaked documents?
So for that specifically, I don't know that we learned something new in the
Okay.
documents, aside from the fact that we've got a clearer understanding of how embeddings are used there. And so that really goes back to like things I've been talking about before and the value of understanding the semantic relevance of pages versus the keywords that you're trying to rank for. So, big picture, search engines work on the vector space model, and they plot your pages in multidimensional space. They plot your
Yep.
query in multidimensional space, and they're looking for the closest distance between. And so, where we've gone wrong or where we haven't caught up in the SEO space is that we're still using the lexical model. So, it's really looking at the
Yeah.
presence and prominence and distribution of words, whereas search engines are looking at meaning. And so, again, seeing that they're comparing that against the site itself, and also comparing it in that way against other sites, and then also knowing that Google is using the lexical model with the semantic model together, and then basically re-ranking all those pages together. That is more informative on topical authority from my perspective than anything we saw in the leak here. And so, really, it goes back to tooling and having tooling that's going to give you that right feedback loop that says like, okay, you are more relevant on this topic than your other competitors are. But again, we know that's only one of the many signals,
Yeah.
but that signal matters a lot more as it relates to the AI overviews than it does for core search.
Yeah, and I think as like if you're a news publisher who writes about sports all the time and suddenly you're writing about home and garden, right? They take
Yeah,
that new content, right, and they compare it to your multidimensional vector of all your content. It was like, this is doesn't fit, right? Or it's a whole like new thing, right? And if you
yep,
don't have enough coverage, consistent enough coverage that is in depth and like quality content that you start building up, like five articles or 10 articles will not be considered that you are an authority on this topic, right?
yeah, and to that end, they have the site radius that they're comparing it against, and if the distance of that new content is too far from your site embeddings, they're going to be like, no, like this isn't it. And again, that's what I'm saying, where authors can potentially offset that, because if you've got an author who's like absolute expert on this, writes for a variety of different sites on this specific subject, that's a signal that can potentially reinforce that this page is valuable. But if you just have like a random author or no author at all, and then you add this content to your site, then Google's gonna be like, no, we need some time for you to like get caught up on this subject matter first.
Yes, absolutely. It's Mike, you wrote something that I start thinking about is like you said, it's better to have less authors with high reputation than to have more authors, right?
Hmm.
You wrote something like that. Can
Yeah.
you can you explain this a little bit?
Yeah, it goes back to what I was just saying, right? Like rather than having like, let's say 100 authors that write on a variety of topics, if you had, let's say, 10 authors that wrote on, a very specific set of topics, that's going to create a stronger signal in this system to indicate that you are, more of an authority as a website on that subject matter. And so, I think that's a challenge because obviously with journalism, you can have people that have a variety of different beats, or your site itself can have, numerous subjects. And of course, you may want to launch into an area that, like you said, home and garden, just because
Yeah.
you feel like that's an opportunity. But just know that you're just not going to have the same level of reputation in these ranking systems around that subject matter if you take that approach.
Yeah, I like to think also of topical authority is like what's adjacent topics, right? So
Hmm.
instead of going completely off like completely different topic, like from sports to home and garden, I think TMZ that very well, like maybe 7 8 years ago, it was all about celebrity gossip, and then they said, okay, with sports, there is a lot of athletes doing like crazy stuff, and it
Hmm.
seems like it's adjacent, and in matter of month they start gaining momentum and authority on athletes doing crazy stuff and gossip and so adjacent topics usually works very well, and instead of just going like completely off the grid to a whole new topic.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. We need to go thoughtfully into new
The
categories,
difference,
right?
yeah.
Like you said, go into the tangential topic rather than like a dramatically different topic. Or if you're going from sports to home and garden, well, maybe you start with, like your version of cribs for athletes, right? Like so, you're talking about their home and garden, so there's going to inherently be an overlap between those two subjects. And then once you've built that, topical cluster around athletes, home and garden, then you can add more about home and garden.
Okay, awesome. Hey guys, I want to remind you we have Q&A here. We have already like maybe 20 30 questions. Please add your questions. We're going to take a quick message from our sponsor NewzDash. And then Mike and I will come back, take all your questions, and we have a little bit more questions about EAT, Google AI overview. We have about questions about like author authority and so many other stuff. So bear with us. Let me invite Dave to the stage, and he's gonna talk a little bit on this. And then after 5 minutes, Mike and I will resume our conversation. So thank you, guys.
All right. Thank you, John. Hello, everyone. Hope everyone's having a great day here. Let me just find, okay, share my screen. All right. Whoops, clicked the wrong one. There we go. Wednesday morning. All right, NewzDash. Here we go. Real-time news SEO software. I'm sure some of you are familiar with it. John's company. What we are different from other evergreen SEO softwares is that we are a true real-time news SEO software, and we are scraping every 15 minutes, giving you real updates for the news industry as well. We are the recipient of the Best Global SEO Software Suite Award in US, Europe, and globally. These are just some of our customers that we work with. We are now in 30 countries, and we just released in Japan, and we are growing there as well. So one of the main things we help publishers with are what should we write about, how big are opportunities, and then are we actually ranking in real time, and then trying to figure out exactly if we're not, how to pivot into ranking. So one of the biggest things that we do is real-time search volume. We're the only tool to show you exactly an estimated search volume of what people are looking for. And we're getting this from 4 different sources. It's Google News, Google Daily, real-time, Google Trends, and then of course a secret source that makes the NewzDash so secret and so powerful. From here, we have a live ranking tracking every 15 minutes, like I said before as well too. This is where it's going to give us a very good idea if we're ranking, what can we do about that, getting SEO recommendations, and if we have any live blogs or anyone else that has that for the Red Live build, we will have that available. Brand visibility is huge with all the Google algo updates. Traffic can be unpredictable. We're able to show you, no matter what's going on, your brand visibility, and as well as having automatic clustering, which is showing things like keywords like Joe Biden or the election. We are able to do a multifaceted approach on keywords and show a dynamic view of them. Another thing as well too is really understanding news topic authority. So any topic you want to go into, we can get very granular, anything like cryptocurrency or sports, anything broad or specific. And we can show you as well too how many keyword shares you have, the ranked URLs, and overall top stories visibility for that. And then as well too, we also have Google Discover, which is in our other tool called NewzDash, which is entity tracking and panel tracking. So we'll be able to see what users are seeing, and this will soon as well be implemented inside of NewzDash. And finally, Nest is coming up in October. Hope to see all of you there, and use King Webinar 15% off for a discount. Thank you very much, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the webinar.
Thank you, Dave, so much. And for the discount, I think it's King Webinar, and this will give you 15% discount. So this is in honor of my king. So King Webinar, go to Nest newsSEO.io and use this code, and I'll give you 15%. Okay, Mike, we have a lot of questions, and I have more questions. So let's continue. Thank you again for being with us today. I know it's an hour and a half, so taking away from the everything else that you have. But
oh, hold on. Well, I got to run real quick. Someone's at my door. I'll be right back.
Okay. Hey guys, this is normal. I have my kids come to my my sessions and meetings so many times. So guys, a quick reminder, please. Here on the left-hand side, you have your questions. If we missed anything, I received your questions also in the form when you submitted them. So I'm gonna go through all these questions here as well. Okay, Mike, thanks for coming back. Okay, let's talk about Google reps. Okay. I think there is a love-hate relationship between the SEO community and the Google reps, right? Some go to the extreme is like, hey, they lying to us on purpose and they misleading us. And some saying is like, no, not really. They have a job. They were told this is what they can share and what they can share. Or sometimes they don't know exactly what's going on. I mean, some Google engineers don't know what's going on the algorithm and becoming so much black box. What's your take on the relationship between SEOs and the Google reps?
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with anything you just said, right? Like, it is their job. They have to do it in certain parameters. I don't think they're bad people. I do think that there's inherent power dynamic between them and our community, right? Like, imagine working at a company, with like 100,000 people, and you can't like make your ideas happen in the way that you want, right?
Yeah.
And then you go to a place where people just hang on your every word, and then imagine you just have like a bad day, like you're gonna say some things that you probably shouldn't say, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it is what it is with respect to that. But I also would like to see improve relations between our community, right? Like, I think if you think about every other platform, whether it's like Instagram or Facebook or TikTok and all that, they all have like a direct relationship with their influencers. And I'm not saying like, fly me out and give me, take me to dinners and all that,
Yeah.
but like,
Why not?
I think that they should do more of, you remember that, what was it
Google
called?
Dance?
Yeah, Google Dance,
Yep.
the Webmaster Central
Yeah.
conference or whatever, where they brought the actual engineers that work on crawling, indexing, and so on to like explain to us, nuances of things that we really want to know. I would love to see more of that, right? And like at the end of the day, SEO is their unpaid workforce.
Yes.
So treat us better.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you don't have to lie to us. Just say like, hey, I can't talk to you about that. And
Yeah.
then spend more time telling us things that are actually interesting. It's
Yeah,
not
no,
that
I'm
hard.
all for the Google Dance. I'm all for like transparency, right? Within the constraints that they have, right? I'm definitely for that. Okay, another question I have for you. How do you assess Google response to the leak
I mean, there hasn't been much of a response, right? Like
or
we
a
got
lack of
the
response? Yeah,
Yeah, we've gotten, we got a confirmation that it's real. We got a little bit of a, couple liners about, hey, like just to stoke the fear, uncertainty, and doubt, where it's like,
yeah,
well, it may not be current stuff and outdated and da da da. But what I have also seen is like some of these Google spokespeople are commenting on specific things. So I think again, Mark Williams Cook, he had posted something about the last significant update data point, and then Gary responded and said like, no, we use that in a binary way or something. So
yeah,
like getting their commentary on specific things, if that's what we get moving forward, then hey, it was worth it,
yeah,
but otherwise, there hasn't been much response. I've seen Danny talk about things from a high level. Like there's been some people that have referenced my post, and then Danny would respond, and he would highlight certain things that I said in my post that he thought that were valuable.
yeah.
So it there has been somewhat of a response, but it's not like a coordinated response of, here's what you guys should be doing. It's still make great content.
Yeah. It's funny without getting too much details, but like I wrote a post about like the impact of the Google leak on the news industry and like all the different attributes I found, and we can see who is reading our content, where they're coming from. So we saw hundreds of Google engineers, software products, and so on reading the content. It was like, and so I will go and read their profiles. It's like, oh, okay. So it was a very interesting thing to see that they are following the story as well. Okay. What are the three top things to do for the SEO or news SEOs in the light of this leak? Like, hey guys, these are the three things that I completely recommend that you start paying attention to and act on.
I think it's the things we already covered, right? Like, so UX is really important.
Yeah.
Making sure that the content doesn't go too far outside of things that the site has demonstrated expertise on, and just understanding that Google is leveraging, excuse me, data beyond what we're thinking about as SEO. So whether it's Chrome data, whether it's click data, and so on. Like I would really love to see one of these SEO tools like a SEMrush or whatever incorporate more of the clickstream data with the
Yeah.
SEO data. So they like SEMrush specifically, they have their dot trends product, which is their competitor with SimilarWeb.
Yeah.
But they don't like parse things out specifically for organic search. I would love to see them do that and then bring that into the organic research thing where it's like, okay, here is how you're performing at a given position with respect to like click-through rate and long clicks and things like that. Here's the expectation. You are below this expectation. You will likely lose this position. Like understanding what those user metrics are doing, I think is going to be an incredibly important thing moving forward. It's always been important, but we haven't known
Yeah.
it. So I'd say like UX, understanding the metrics and just keeping your content closely related.
Okay. I want to ask you a specific question about small content publishers, small news publishers, and new news publishers, right? It
Mhm.
seems like in the light of the Google leak, documents and what we have learned from helpful content updates and all the other stuff, they are at disadvantage, right?
Sure. Yeah.
How they are, how they can, what they can do, right? If I'm a new news publisher into the space, or I'm a small news publisher, I don't have hundreds of writers, I don't write 100 articles a day, what can be done?
Yeah, I think for those sorts of situations, you got to really take care of your byline. And what I mean by that is, okay, let's say you've got five journalists that write for your site. Get those people also writing for some of these bigger sites as well on that same subject matter, and then make sure that they're getting the links back to your site. When they in their author profiles where it's saying like these are other places they write for, because that's going to give a stronger signal to Google, like, hey, these are authoritative writers on this subject, and so
Yeah.
let's apply that same level of authority to this smaller site. So I think it really goes back to just reinforcing the signals that Google is looking for, and also just making better content, right? Like when you have those additional signals, whereas the click signals, the relevant signals, the information gain signals, those things can help you overpower some of these other signals that Google is reinforcing that give brands the unfair advantage. Because when you think about it, when you talk about relevance, user behavior, and links, those are all things that big brands naturally get,
Yeah.
right? Like they naturally get more clicks because people recognize those things. And then the other thing I would say is, focus on your branding, right? And I know that no one wants to hear
Branding.
that as an SEO.
Yeah.
I think, doing things like display ads or, running native ads and things like that, so more and more people recognize your brand when they see it in the SERP, is incredibly powerful. Even running like YouTube ads, the ones where you only pay if the user watch the whole thing. I think it's called TrueView. All that stuff can have a lot of value downstream in search, and we can't ignore that, right? Like you frankly just need to build a brand in addition to the tactical stuff that we're talking about here.
Yeah, or simply hire Mike. I mean, it's really Mike. It's funny that the first advice you gave, I give similar advice, but in the opposite direction. So
Mhm.
it's a publisher in a certain space, and they have hundreds of writers, but none of them are like true authority on the topic, right? So I said,
Mhm.
you know what? Go hire some of the publishers who are really big writers. Sorry, hire some of the writers who write for CNN and ESPN and so on, and start right on your site, 10 of them, right? And
Mhm.
they start like adding them in their bio and their LinkedIn and so on. So I think it can work both ways, right?
Yeah.
To find these kind of authors. Let's talk about AI overview.
Mhm.
So it was like a crazy thing in the beginning, right? Everyone gloom and doom, the whole business is dying, and then slowly we found that it's not that bad right now, or it's being scaled down drastically from 80% to like 17% or 5%.
Mhm.
What's your take on AI overview?
It's a bad product.
Yeah,
Like,
oh, definitely, yeah, no
yeah,
doubt.
it's not a good product at all. And how it works is really fascinating to me. I wrote about it a year ago. I'll drop the link in a second. And how it works is really far more about relevance than anything else, because it's a separate microservice outside of the core
Yeah,
ranking algorithms. And so what it's doing is it's finding the most relevant chunks or subsets from the content and then feeding that to the language model and then using that to generate the response. So it is a very valuable thing um, for, if you don't rank well in the core, like 10 blue links or whatever we're calling it these days, to make get more visibility. But the thing is, we don't know what the click behavior is on there. Like Google just keeps telling us like, oh, it's better for everybody and
yeah,
all of that, but we don't have any indication of it. And in fact, they're just continuing to like obfuscate it, um, by like not parsing it out specifically in GSC. They're saying like, oh yeah, the data is in there in GSC, but they're not giving us any way to like filter
yeah.
specifically for AI overviews. So it's kind of like disingenuous for them to say that. But yeah, I just think it's a bad product. And, I like that they've been making improvements in the Ray update. And I call it that because,
Yes.
we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Lily
Yes.
Ray. Um, but yeah, I just think it's a bad product. And there's a lot of ways that you can get yourself into it. And I think for news publishers, it's a potential huge threat, but we just don't know how much of a threat it is.
Yeah, shout out to Lily Ray. I mean, the amount of information and feedback that she put on Twitter, I think it had me personally. I think it had a direct impact on what we see today.
100%.
So yes, I'm with you. Let's call it the Ray update. With Google AI overview, do you think it's what's the question I had in mind? It lost me. I was going to ask about, okay, I'm gonna skip that, I can't remember it. Let's talk about authorship, right? Authority, EAT. What is in the document, what are in the documents that we spoke about a little bit about it, but what can we do to enhance EAT, authorship, author authority, and so on?
Yeah, there's not much specifically on that as a concept, but there are features in there that could be considered for EEAT. And so EAT is really like an abstraction for Google to explain it to us.
Yeah.
But it's just like a bunch of systems working together to achieve these things. And so I think, again, it goes back more into the embeddings because they've got author embeddings, they've got entity embeddings, they've got website embeddings. And so really they're associating, this concept of authority with those levels of embeddings and then using that as EEAT. And so, previously I didn't really believe in the concept, right? Like I was just like, oh, this is just more Google speak to like,
Yeah.
kind of misdirect us. But the more I've learned about vector representations and how they can be associated with different things, the more I've understood like, okay, EEAT is a function of this. Because, when we used to talk about authorship back in the day, it was like, oh, rel author tags and da da da. But the reality of it is that authorship is not marked up very well across the web. Like it's marked up
Yeah.
well on news sites, of course, but across the web, based on the measures that I saw, it was like 3%. And so what Google has had to do is figure out ways to extract authors and then also associate things with them. And so by that same token that we saw that they've got, site vectors, and then they have, the authority measures that go with that, the topical authority measures that go with that, they have that on an author level. And so they can say, okay, this page is by this author. Here's all the content we have for this author. Okay, this new piece of content doesn't really map to what they typically talk about. So then they can be like, okay, well, we don't think you're an expert here. We're not going to give it the same level of signal that we give, these other things that you talk about. And then the topics themselves have, these embeddings, and they can associate a variety of things with that. And then they can say, okay, this page maps to this embedding, really well, or this entity embedding really well. So this is an authoritative page on this subject. So really, I believe it is all about vector embeddings for EEAT. And then beyond that, you have your typical like link signals and so on that's layered there for them to have an understanding of the relationships of expertise with content ideas.
Yeah, I was told by one of the Google engineers that having a knowledge graph for an author, that becomes an entity and it's treated differently from just having a byline by a certain author, right? So one of the things we encourage publishers is let's try to get knowledge graphs for your top authors, right? So it's treated differently. And even in GD Dash, like for example, when we have every author analysis, we show you what are the most visible topics and entities that they talk about. When they write about this entity, this is how much impressions that they get, visibility in Google and so on. So it's very interesting to know that there is an author embeddings similar to topics and so on. Okay.
Yep.
Anything about Google Discover in the leaked document?
Very little. So there's a couple mentions of it. It's not really clear on, what they mean, but the ranking system for Discover is called Browsy, but again, there's just not a lot of
Browser.
information on
Okay.
what it does and what it means.
Okay. Thank you. Um. Uh, okay. Okay. Let's take some of the questions. We have a lot of questions here. This question is from Mark, director of SEO Boston Globe. I'm curious how you think paywalls factor into these CTR metrics. I know Google says paywall pop ups, interstitials are not penalized as intrusive, but I theorize it absolutely does impact these CTR metrics and could devalue sites that way. What do you think?
I 100% agree. I would imagine that sites with paywalls probably have like a 90-95% bounce rate. So yeah, that definitely impacts things negatively. Obviously the relevance isn't impacted if you mark it up properly and serve the content with the I can't remember the exact scheme of vocabulary, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
Um,
paywall schema.
and Yeah, it's definitely gonna have a high bounce rate and definitely not gonna work as well in Nav Boost. So it is what it is, right? Like you use a paywall for a very specific reason. You want to get paid. So I don't think there's much we can do about that, really.
Yeah, I like soft paywalls where you can show. I think the term is flexible sampling, right? You can show users like one or two pages, and then ask them for maybe their email, and then because usually users who submit their emails or newsletter subscribers convert better than just like people coming to your site. So
Hmm.
uh, thanks. So here, let me show more questions. Here. How can an author demonstrate the expertise on a topic except from the author page? This is from Sarah. She's an SEO specialist at the Class Editorial Italy.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily the author page. I think it's just what they write about. And so the author page is really just about making it easier for Google to associate things with that person, right? Like if you are an author in one place and you're linking to other places that you write, which links to other articles that you write, it just makes it easier for Google to identify other things that author has written and associate it with that same entity, with those same series of embeddings. So it's not so much about writing on the author page that you're an expert in tech or whatever. It's more about demonstrating it through the content that they can find that you've written.
Thank you. I think we answered part of this question. Any insights in Google Discover or ranking in Google News? This is from Muthali. Sorry if I butchered your name. SEO lead, Hindu, India. So, Mike, there are three surfaces, right, or multiple surfaces. There's top stories in Google search, right, where Google show like some news elements. There's the Google News itself, which is news.google.com, and there's Google Discover. So we discussed about Google Discover. Anything mentioned about top stories in Google search or about Google News, news.google.com?
I didn't see anything specific to top stories, but yeah, there is a lot of information related to news itself. And like I said, there's a
Okay.
lot of other information that are in those real-time boost design documents. So for instance, there's something that's called the fresh article score. And it's really like, based on they have this like freshness classifier that associates whether or not the article is like considered high quality news. And so they basically are trying to discern the difference between, the New York Times and CNN talking about something versus like random low quality fake news blogs or whatever
Yeah.
talking about something. And then a lot of it is like some of the same stuff that we're seeing elsewhere, like the document NSR. So I still don't know what NSR stands for, but it's really like, it looks like based on the descriptions, it's kind of like the site rank score. And then there's also correlated salient terms. So again, a lot of the things that you're highlighting in NewzDash with respect to like entities and
Yeah.
salient and all that seems to be really valuable there. So yeah, there are definitely things in there, but I don't know that there's much specific to news that we're not already considering in the space. But again, the real time boost thing did talk about how historically Twitter was just like the primary source.
Yeah.
And Google was like, all right, well, we got to have our own version of this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember when Twitter used to show up in news, Reddit used to show up in news. A very famous incident was the Boston Marathon bombing, and then Google was like highlighting some stories from Reddit in the news, and it was like wrong information, and people were like chasing wrong suspects. It was not good. Okay. This question is from Jessie. Hey, Jessie. She's the SEO at The Guardian. Can you define how you think about clusters? Is it a number of stories over a period of time? Hey, we wrote 50 stories about that topic over a week. Is it 2 dozen explainers, guides by experts, writers over several months? What else are you thinking about under topic clusters, especially on new topics?
Yeah, I wouldn't say a topic cluster is inherently a function of time. I think it's more about, you just having that content. And let me clarify, because I know I said, earlier, you shouldn't like go into an area without having a bunch of content in that area if you're not um, if you're not an expert on that subject. But what I mean more is that the topical cluster is like, do you have a series of assets that are very related on that subject matter? So back to the hub and spoke model that we talked about, right? Like, so example that just popped into my head is like, let's say you had, a guide to going to Disney World, right? So
Mhm.
you have like the core page that just talks about it generally, and then you have, a guide to like how you use the what do they call it, the Genie app or whatever. Your guide to rope drop, which is like, getting there as soon as it opens. Your guide to eating, the different restaurants in Disney World. And so what you want to do is identify like what are all the related concepts to that
Yep.
core concept, and then make sure you have something that covers the subject on those different tangential concepts, and then link everything back to the core concept or the hub page, and also be linking across pages as
Yeah.
well. So you're just giving a very clear indication to Google, like this is all related, and then they're also going to see by the relationships from a semantic perspective, like, okay, these all overlap pretty heavily. So it's not necessarily like a type of content. It's not necessarily a certain number of assets. It really depends on what the topic is. And then, doing the keyword research to find the areas of that subject to make sure you're covering it comprehensively.
Okay. Thank you. Um, this is, I think, about topic authority. A website strong in its niche, having basically zero presence on new surfaces. Would you think forum UGC content might be a blocker, and it's worth considering to block it from crawlers? This is from Grizzly Gores. Sorry again if I butchered your name. SEO performance manager, Better Collective, Poland.
Yeah, I do think so. I mean, it's possible to be a news site and also have UGC, but if Google is already thinking that you're not a news site, and you can't like get in there in the way that you used to, the UGC is probably an indication that they don't believe. Excuse me. UGC is probably reinforcing what their belief about the site is. And so, yeah, maybe you just want to like, no index that section or block it in robots.txt, and then see if that changes. And if it doesn't, well, then, unleash it.
Yeah. So I like what you said, Mike. I don't remember if you wrote it or you said it somewhere. SEOs need to experiment more, right?
Mhm.
And it's like this is a value that we have lost due to like constraints at work, or like we're busy, we have our plates full. But I think this is like could be a great experiment, right? Take half of your site, remove UGC, or take the full all UGC, block it for a while, and see what's going on. This is one thing. The other thing also, if you have zero presence on every news surface, probably Google is not considering you a news source to begin with. So there is
Mhm.
an article we wrote in NewzDash to check if Google consider you a news source or not. I'm gonna try to find it and put it here. Okay, let's take another question. Mike, this question from Eleanor. Hey, Eleanor, we used to work together. Curious, hey, Mike, curious to know your thoughts and insights about changes and possible impact on video and multimedia, especially for broadcast news publishers to consider.
Yeah, I didn't dig into the video stuff too much. The one thing I did notice is that they, make a determination on whether or not it's considered a news site. And one of the things that it said is like if 50% of the pages, the primary content is video, then it's considered a news site. But there's a whole bunch of different modules related to video, related to YouTube, and so on, that I think are worth digging into. But I just haven't had the time yet.
Okay, thank you. Um, okay, we have few minutes to go. This is another question. This question is from Michael Cohen, SEO product manager at the Weather Company. Hey, Mike. When working on sites with thousands of pages of content, going back over a decade at least, what is the best way to balance cannibalization between older articles and new articles? Should we focus more on updating older articles with fresh content?
It can go either way, right? Like I think that again, especially for news sites, Google is looking to prioritize the newer content, but there's obviously value in going back and
Yeah.
republishing things and making adjustments. So if a page is already performing well for the keyword, then yeah, I would say just make that adjust, like do a refresh to it. But if you got pages that have decayed over time and they don't rank per page one and traffic is nearing zero, I would say focus on a new page. But it's not just the content itself, it also is the internal linking structure. And what I see that's very common is that, especially in the news space, you end up with a bunch of pages that have the same anchor text. And so you're sending, conflicting signals to
Yeah.
Google. You're saying like, oh, this is my, Jerry West just died blog post. But, this is also another blog post about Jerry West. And so you're using Jerry West as the anchor text for both. But right now, because Jerry West did just die, your newer content is going to be the one that performs better. But over time, it's going to be, okay, you've got two Jerry West pages with Jerry West and the anchor text, and you want to make sure that you are deciding for Google, like this is the one that I want you to rank.
Yeah. Another thing also to consider: are we talking about evergreen content or news content? Right.
Mm-hmm.
Evergreen content, you should definitely look at all these metrics and uh, see if you need to prune some or if you need to refresh some. For news, there is, as Mike said, and I think Google said the same. There is a value on archives, right? So I can't remember which news publisher that decided that they want to delete 50% of their news content to improve. Site whatever, and Google said just wait a second. And also it impacts your topic authority. If you have
Mm-hmm.
1000 articles on topic X and overnight you have only 100, I think it does impact it as well, right, Mike?
100%. Yep.
Okay, good. Okay, any big technical SEO takeaways from the docs, things that were learned or reinforced as being very important? This is Sarah, group product manager at the Washington Post.
I don't think that there's anything else beyond what we discussed, really.
Okay. Okay. This question is from Lee, SEO consultant, Japan. In Rand Fishkin's article, he mentioned that click data is used to determine which link graph index tier a document belongs to. Does this imply that Google categorized pages with a website into 3 indexing tiers based on their total clicks?
Yeah, we talked about that already.
Okay, can you talk about a little bit more? So we know that the different types of indexes that they have or indices that they have. Uh, uh, so the link graph is tiered with the click data together, and then they decide. Okay, you go to the fresh index or the memory flash memory index or the third one, right? Is this
Mhm.
correct?
Yep.
Okay. I think a long time ago we used to say like primary index, secondary index, and stuff like this. But I like how
Yeah,
you.
yeah, you had like the supplemental index, but even
Yeah.
that was, more than one, or it's more than two things at that point as well. It's
Okay.
just again, like the abstraction layer that we talk about it at is like, primary index, supplemental index. But supplemental index, I think that is what is referred to as Terra Google. And again, that's like where pages go to die, basically.
Yeah.
You definitely want to be in the primary index, and then within that, you want to be in the flash memory. And so your links are more valuable in that space than they are in any of those others.
Okay. Awesome.
And
Uh,
one thing I do want to reinforce, that
sure.
is not considered at all in any of our link indices. Like there's no visibility that we have into that. So we're looking at things based on, the measures of the old version of PageRank and all that. So we still don't have a clear understanding of how Google is weighing pages, side by side, basically.
Okay. We have another question here from Andrea, CTO News.de, Germany. Do you have any insight on which Google system the leaked API actually interacts with? I mean, it's called Content Warehouse. Does this system have a name you know of?
So it it interacts with a variety of them. There is a series of them that is mentioned in the documentation. I don't want to say it interacts with all of them because I don't know that definitively, but it seems to interact with most of the internal systems that they talk about. So as an example, the crawling system is called Trawler, and that's mentioned a variety of times
Yeah.
throughout there. One of the indexing systems is called Alexandria, as I mentioned before. That's mentioned in a variety of places. Core Web Vitals is called Volt. That's mentioned in a variety of places. So there's an indication that this is like the API that everything brings data back to, basically.
Okay, awesome. Mike, I just want to say thank you so much. Every time I see you, I meet with you, I listen to you, I read your content, I learned so many new things. So thanks for granting us this hour and a half of your time. Two last questions. One, how can people reach you, right? And the second thing, any final words, thoughts that you want to leave the community with?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for having me. This has been great. And you can reach me at iPullRank.com. I'm Mike at iPullRank.com if you want to email me. And also, I'm at iPullRank on all the things, whether it's Instagram or Twitter or whatever, which I refuse to call X. And yeah, my final thoughts are that what I really appreciate is what we can do as a community, right? Like when you ask me the question of like, should I hold these sorts of things or not? I think we get way more value as we share things as a community because, there are ideas that you have that I didn't have and, other people are going to have that I'm not going to have. And I think that's how we really scale what we learn in this space. And the more that we, do experiments and share the outcomes and things like that, the better that we get because we can't rely on Google to tell us everything.
Yes.
We've got to take ownership of our own education.
I totally agree. I couldn't have said it any better. So, Mike, thanks again, and hopefully we'll see you very soon. Thanks,
Of course.
everyone, for coming, joining us for the last 90 minutes. This webinar will be available shortly on video and, on YouTube and other channels. So, once again, thank you and have a blessed day. Thank you. Bye.